Welcome to The Humble Philosopher. I'm hoping that you clicked on this video because you're one of those people who gets the war in Ukraine, who understands why it's important, both for the, monumental human tragedy that it is, but also because of what it represents in terms of history. For me, it's the clearest cut case of good versus evil since World War II. And what separates the war in Ukraine from other conflicts around the globe is the clear cut moral reasons for it. I'll let others, paint the more detailed historical background for what led up to the war. But it's abundantly clear to me, and I'm sure it is, to others and hopefully to you, that the reason for the Russian invasion was because Ukraine, the Ukrainian people, the majority of the Ukrainian people were taking the right side of history, and that the Russian government could not allow that because it can't survive as it is if people stand up to it. And that's the reason for the invasion. And that's then the reason we have a moral obligation in, liberal democracies to stand with the Ukrainians and to do everything we can to support them. So maybe you'll recognize channel names such as Jake Bro, Anna from Ukraine, Vlad Vexler, Professor Gerdes, I hope I have that name right, Inside Russia, as some of the outstanding channels that have been doing such a great job of continuing to report about what's going on in Ukraine and keeping that in the public awareness. And if you are that type of person, if you recognize those channels, I have a special request, which is simply to listen to the idea that I lay out here. And if you find value in that, if you think this is a good idea, maybe you can reach out to those channels so that they could then take a look at this video and see what they think, and maybe a conversation could get started. Maybe we can all sort of seed an idea in the internet. So the idea is something along the lines of the Ukrainian doctrine. And so this doctrine would simply be, for liberal democracies around the world, but specifically NATO member countries, EU member countries, the Five Eyes, that would be the United States, Canada, UK, Australia, and New Zealand. But anybody else who wanted to get on board, anybody else who wants to support, democracy around the globe, be it Mexico, Japan, South Africa, whomever, that moving forward, it is the policy. I'm an American, so I'll speak for America. America should make it our policy that when there is a movement of sufficient organization and strength that is standing for democratic values, that is making real sacrifices, and is fighting totalitarian, fascist, corrupt power, such as the Ukrainians are, that it is our doctrine moving forward that we do everything that we can to support that democratic movement against, the forces of evil, we'll say. Now, perhaps something like this already exists, right? And I'm sure everybody's sort of making this same argument in various different ways. But I don't think a fine enough point has been put on it. And I don't think that, we have the concretization of that idea well enough, or the support for Ukraine as it stands wouldn't be so tenuous. Again, I'm here in America, and obviously I support the Ukrainians. But, I can tell you that I don't even know where that support is going and how long it will last. So I think, specifically, the Ukrainians deserve everything that we can do to support them. But also, they deserve to have their struggle honored and recognized by something that would look like, sound like a Ukrainian doctrine moving forward. And the way that I think this would play out as a practical matter would be to support the right side of history moving forward. Specifically, let's take a country like Venezuela, which is being run, by a dictator, and it's being run into the ground, and the economy is falling apart. And here in America, we're having to absorb some of those refugees. If we want democracy to flourish in Venezuela, we should do everything we can to support those who are willing to take that on, support those who are willing to make that sacrifice. If there was a clear policy that everybody in the world knew, that anytime there's a political movement that roughly meets certain standards, such as have been met in Ukraine, that liberal democracies, that the West will get behind that movement in a very real way. I think if we were to do that, if we were to make that known, if we were to formalize that we would see more of what I'll, for lack of a better term, call the right side of history coming together. We could look at a country like Iran, whose people have been, making real efforts to modernize, liberalize Iranian society, to make it a safer place for women. As it stands now, at least, just as a, civilian, looking at that, it's like, yes, everybody on the West hopes for the best in Iran, but there's nothing that we're doing officially that would support. Now, I'm not saying that, we go in and fight wars in all these situations. But if we were to have a specific policy that people knew that if they got together behind these ideas, formalized, that they would get support up to and including military intervention when possible. I mean, it's one of those things. It's going to be individual and what's feasible. But the world is really split between liberal democracies, dictatorships, and then fledgling countries all over who could go one way or the other. And at the end of the day, what everybody wants, what everybody has to have first before they have the luxury of political philosophies, is some sort of stability. And far too often, what a strong man offers is immediate stability. And so everywhere from, struggling nations in Africa to Latin America to, even the Uyghurs in China, maybe, if they had a clear signal that if they took specific steps, that there would be robust support for them. I think this is how you would encourage and seed liberal democracy around the world. It needs power. It needs support. It needs resources. It needs clear commitments. And so again, I'm not saying that, speaking of America specifically, that America has to police the world. But at the same time, America can't step back from that and then just allow Russia and China and whomever else to fill that power vacuum. There's always somebody at the top. So let's make that top, let's broaden that. Let's make that as many liberalized Western style democracies as possible, and make the offer that anytime there's a serious movement in any country, whether that's within the country or against, an invading country from the outside, such as is the case in Ukraine, as long as they meet certain criteria, such as has been clearly met in Ukraine, that the West then would have a stated obligation to provide as much support as is practically possible to support that movement. And we could call that the Ukrainian Doctrine. And if we had already had something like this, then the support for Ukraine wouldn't be as tenuous, wouldn't be as ad hoc as it has been. And so we could, declare this doctrine, and the first beneficiary of that could be the Ukrainian people, who may have to fight this war for years to come. And then moving forward, in all these various societies and countries that are, on that tightrope between democracy and totalitarianism, dictatorship, those on the side of democracy would have a clear signal from the rest of us that we have their back. And if we're unwilling to do that, then we're willing to split the globe up just to protect our own comfort. And, we'll go back to some form of the Cold War. Forget the Cold War was America against Russia. It was just democracy against totalitarianism, democracy against dictatorship. So that's the rough outline, the Ukrainian Doctrine. If this is something that you think is a good idea, maybe we can just start talking about it. I would love for the idea to get out there. It doesn't have to have anything to do with me or this channel. I just think moving forward, we should use this tragedy in Ukraine to focus our minds and to really see what's at stake. Is the world going to be a liberal and democratic place, or is it going to be taken over by strong men? All right. Thank you for clicking on this video.